Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. This is your host Thomas Tyree from On the Hot Podcast. Today, I have some bonus content for you guys. The bonus content I will be covering today in this video will be regarding in this world of football and the NFL world. In this bonus segment, I will be sharing my 2022 NFL draft steals. The steals of the draft that we saw of last spring in 2022 NFL draft. I will be sharing my draft steals in this video. So starting off with my number one draft steal is Tariq Woolen, cornerback from the Seattle Seahawks. The Seahawks have had a nick for finding defensive backs in late rounds of NFL drafts. You look at their draft history at selecting defensive backs or DBs when they have selected two of the three guys that were known to be a part of the Legion of Boom in Seattle over the years, with Richard Sherman at the cornerback position and Cam Chancellor, one of the hardest hitting safeties in my opinion in NFL history. Both were selected in late round picks when the Seattle Seahawks were figuring out things in the early 2010s of figuring out their rebuild. They love that they have a nick for drafting corners or safeties in later rounds, and they did the same thing by drafting Tariq Woolen. They did an excellent job drafting him. He was a steal. He was a 5th round pick, 153 overall in this past NFL draft, and he balled out his rookie season. He showed great ball hawk skills. In my opinion, the second best cornerback in the National Football League in terms of rookies this past NFL season. He was so good, but I would put him behind Sauce Gardner. But boy, does Tariq Woolen have a bright future in Seattle. He actually finished the season with 6 interceptions, which was tied for first in the NFL amongst DBs in interceptions this year. So Tariq Woolen was definitely a steal of the draft and definitely has a bright future with the Seattle Seahawks. Moving on to Dameon Pierce, running back for the Houston Texans. Huge home run selection that the Texans got their hands on Dameon Pierce. Selected him in the 4th round, 107th overall in the past NFL draft. Was misused in Florida. That is the reason why he was under the radar in the 2022 NFL draft and wasn't talked about as much when you talk about running backs coming out of that class in the 2022 draft. Dan Mullen, former head coach for the Florida Gators, myself being a Florida Gators fan, knows that Dameon Pierce was misutilized in that Florida Gators offense when Dan Mullins had his hands on the offense and had his hands on the program of Florida University. So definitely misused, but Dameon Pierce made the most of his opportunities the minute he got drafted. Quickly became the starting running back for the Houston Texans and was a X factor, you should say, on one of the worst teams in the NFL this past season. Definitely an offensive guy that would get going behind no matter what the circumstances was. The offensive line for the Houston Texans is still not set or complete in their rebuild situation currently, but nearly had 1,000 yards rushing behind that Houston Texans offensive line. It definitely contributed offensively to one of the worst teams in the National Football League this past season in the Houston Texans. So Dameon Pierce is definitely going to be one of the building blocks in that rebuild for Houston. Definitely had a home run selection selecting him in this past NFL draft. Moving on to Malcolm Rodriguez, linebacker for the Detroit Lions. Malcolm Rodriguez was drafted in the 6th round, 188th overall by the Detroit Lions. And boy, I will be honest with you guys, as much content as I watch of sports, much film, I had no idea who Malcolm Rodriguez was until I watched Hard Knocks on HBO Max before the season started, when they showed the Detroit Lions. And Malcolm Rodriguez was one of the best players to watch on Hard Knocks. Definitely climbed up the depth chart very quickly in training camp with the Detroit Lions. He wowed me watching Hard Knocks. I can only imagine the impression that he left on all the coaching staff for the Detroit Lions. They had no choice but to put him in the starting lineup, he was a great factor for the Detroit Lions defensively this year. He was a great athletic player that fit well in the Detroit Lions front seven. He was a great tackler and was a great guy that stuffed the run for the Detroit Lions this past season. So I think Malcolm Rodriguez has earned his spot on that starting lineup for the Detroit Lions next season. Definitely looking forward to what Malcolm Rodriguez can do, but definitely was a steal in the draft at the linebacker position. And then we move on to Brock Purdy, quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. Mr. Irrelevant. The final overall pick in this past NFL draft was Brock Purdy. He looked like a veteran quarterback out there this season. The minute he got out there, when Jimmy Garoppolo got hurt, later in the season against the Miami Dolphins. He came in and helped the 49ers win that game. Didn't do too much in that game. But it was when he took off as a guy, a rookie quarterback that was not supposed to do what he did this past season. Looked like a veteran guy, poised, calm, cool, and collected in the pocket. Outdueled and blew out Tom Brady in his first NFL start. Fast forward, did not lose an NFL start all the way up into the NFC Championship game, which he helped the San Francisco 49ers get to. We can't forget about his huge performance he had in his wild card weekend matchup, in his wild card weekend game against the Seattle Seahawks in the first round. Then outplayed Dak Prescott in the second round of the playoffs. Even though it wasn't pretty, he was a better quarterback between him and Dak in the second round and divisional round, and helped the 49ers get all the way to the NFC Championship. To me, he is no doubt, in my opinion, has earned the right to be the San Francisco 49ers starting quarterback moving forward. If he did that as a third string, imagine what he could do in a full offseason when he's getting reps with the number ones the whole entire NFL offseason all the way up until week 1. And then last but not least, draft steals for me is George Pickens, Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver. Nobody in the NFL drafts wide receivers better than the Pittsburgh Steelers when it comes to drafting wide receivers after the first round. They're like the wide receiver U of the NFL in terms of drafting young wide receivers in later rounds. You look at their draft history of the wide receivers they drafted at the first round, and Hines Ward, they drafted Mike Wallace, they drafted Antonio Brown, they drafted Emmanuel Sanders, they drafted Juju Smith, and now they drafted George Pickens. This team is great at drafting wide receivers in later rounds, and they sure did it this past NFL draft. George Pickens was the second drafted in the second round, 52nd overall. He showed he can be a great route runner very soon. Arguably had the catch of the year in the early weeks of the NFL season, when in that Thursday night primetime matchup when the Pittsburgh Steelers matched up with the Cleveland Browns, when he had that amazing one-hand catch that reminded me quickly of the 2014 Odell Beckham catch that he had over Brandon Carr in that NFL season. So George Pickens has shown me he can be a great route runner one day. The chemistry is obviously going to grow between himself and Kenny Pickett over the next few years. Both were rookies this year, so they had plenty of time to grow the chemistry out there in Pittsburgh. And he showed me he can make highlight plays. That's everything that you want a wide receiver nowadays in the NFL. So those are all my 2022 NFL draft steals, and I can't wait to see what NFL draft steals will what players will transpire themselves as NFL draft steals later in the season, 2023 NFL season, and then around this time next year, we're heading into the draft. But that is all the time I have for you guys today. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for listening. This is your host, Thomas Tyree, signing off, and I'll see you guys on next week's episode.